Hello, and welcome to the Rossaround Backstage podcast, talking with artists, technicians, musicians, producers, directors, and all the interesting and talented people that make it all happen for you.
Hi, this is the Rossaround Backstage podcast, and I'm Ross Pallone. And today I'm here up in the city of Ventura, and I am talking to Mr. Tim Aller, who is an old friend of mine. He is a tour manager for the Robert Cray Band. He also manages the Robert Cray Band out of the Fitzgerald Hartley offices here in Ventura. In the past, he's been a recording engineer and a programmer, and now his career has taken some different turns. So we're going to start talking to Tim right now. And my first question to you, Tim, is how did you get into this business?
Well, actually I started off, I was a musician. From the time I was a little kid, I was a drummer. Played in bands, did all the, I did every kind of gig you could possibly imagine, from recording sessions to animal acts, variety shows,
right?
Wedding receptions, bar mitzvahs, whatever, everything, and toured. And I started doing, in the 80s, when there was a whole kind of high-tech thing going on, drum machines started going. I actually didn't like any of that stuff. But I had a couple of producers that I was working with as a drummer who had started using drum machines. And they said, well, if you can come in, we'll have you come in and like overdub hi-hats, do some cymbal crashes, tom fills or whatever. And then I had one songwriter-producer that said, you should get Simmons drums. And so I bought these Simmons drums, and because there was a lot of work just like overdubbing the drum machine stuff. And then what happened was people would say, well, do you program drum machines? And I didn't. But at the time, there were two main drum machines that were used. There was the Oberheim DMX and the Lindrum. I mean, there was some other stuff around, but that was kind of the main thing. And there were like Oberheim guys, or DMX guys, and there were Lind guys, and you were either one or the other. And of course, I knew people with both that that had that stuff. So I just decided one day, okay, I'm gonna be a drum machine programmer. And next time somebody calls, I'm just gonna say, yeah, I do that. So, and I hadn't ever touched one of the machines. So what happened was, I get a call, and it was for a record. And the guy says, well, hey, I understand you do some programming. Somebody had told him or something, do the Simmons drum stuff. And, I go, yeah, and I'm a drummer, so I do, real hi-hat overdubs, tom overdubs, Simmons pad stuff or whatever. And they go, well, we really need drum machine stuff. And I go, yeah, well, no problem. And they said, well, are you Lindrum or DMX? And I said, both, whichever you want. And they go, wow, that was really impressive. The truth was I was neither. So they said, well, they wanted to hire me, and I want to say that they called me like on a Saturday, and the record was supposed to start on Monday. And so I said, I'm booked until Tuesday. So they go, okay. So they actually, put off starting the record until Tuesday. And I made calls, and they had said they wanted a DMX. So I called a friend of mine that owned a DMX, and I rented it from him. And I spent Sunday and Monday learning how to program drum machines. And on Tuesday, I'm doing a record,
Impressive.
And so I, literally just, BS my way in. And then later on ended up doing kind of the same thing with the Lindrum, but I was sort of a DMX guy for a while doing that. And then after that was going on, the Lin 9000 came out. And I had started working and I was starting to do a lot more of that stuff. And I had done an album where I'd just done overdubs and stuff with a guy named Tim Weisberg, who's this flute player. You know Tim.
Yes, I know
Anyway,
Tim.
so he did this real high-tech record called High Risk that was all electronic stuff, which is funny because, he was known for doing, his big record was with Dan Fogelberg, so it's all kind of very hippie, candles and sandalwood. And so he totally goes this completely different direction from his audience. And And I said, I want to try and make this stuff happen live, integrate the whole studio and live stuff. And the Lin 9000 came along, and I ended up getting involved with the company a little bit, and I got a Lin 9000 that was serial number 007. So it was like the very, very beginning. They were crashing and stuff. So, but through Tim, he was so hooked up with all the equipment manufacturers that I ended up working it out, owning a lot of gear. Some of it I got for a deal, some of it I got for free, some of it was really his, but I borrowed it, and I ended up with a whole bunch of, like drum machines and keyboards and stuff, and I started sequencing junk for people and getting a lot of work, studio work doing that, and touring with him doing it. And so at that point, what happened was I'd be in the studio a lot, and you'd end up, like as a musician, you'd get a call and you'd go in and you'd be there for, a couple hours or whatever, maybe less. You'd play a track or two or whatever and then leave. As soon as I started programming, I'd be there working with the songwriter or the producer or the artist or, any combination of that, and we'd start off doing all the programming. So you're spending a lot of time with that one song. And then I would be sequencing the keyboard. Sometimes it would be with a keyboardist that would be playing, and I would be, doing the sequencing part of it. And sometimes I'd be doing some of the keyboard parts of it or whatever, and so it's even more time. Then we'd go in the studio and start putting all that stuff to tape, back when there was tape. And so what would happen is I would end up spending a lot of time in the studio with sometimes an engineer that was just like the second engineer. He was just there because he was cheaper, or whatever different circumstances where he would end up being kind of a hack. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, why don't I just charge a little bit more? I'm getting paid by the hour here. I'll charge a little bit more, and I'll just engineer it as well. And then what ended up happening is I'd spend a lot of time on the song, and they would go, well, we need to do some guitar overdubs. Why don't you do that? We need to do vocals. Or would you like to mix this track? And next thing, so I just sort of, without trying, kind of did the same thing with engineering as I did with drum programming, where I just said, I'm available to engineer. And, at the time, I was mostly interested in playing the drums and being a musician. That was the main thing that I liked to do. But, in the music business, the phone rings and somebody offers you money to do something, you generally do it. And the truth was I was getting a lot of work programming. I was getting and then I was getting all this work engineering, which was, to me, there was always something wrong about it, because I knew all these really fantastic engineers, and I'm going from taking the place of a hack engineer to taking the place of an engineer who's actually much better engineer than me, mm-hmm. And then I had gotten to the point where I was playing a lot and engineering a lot and programming a lot, and I started having trouble mainly because of those damn Simmons pads. I don't know if
I remember
originally
them. Yeah.
They were like Formica.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got some like rubber over them or whatever, but there was this shock to your wrist that was really bad, and I started having all kinds of problems with tendonitis and physical problems, and I was 28 and starting to have trouble getting up in the morning, like I was arthritic. And I started thinking, oh man, I always figured I was just going to be I was going to be a musician my whole life. What's going to happen if I can't play? I don't really know how to do anything else. So it opened my mind to other possibilities. And what happened was I would get these opportunities to engineer. And then one time I used to have a cartage guy that would, move my stuff around from studio to studio. And he had gotten a job being a tour manager for David Benoit, who you know. And they had a guy that was doing sound for him, that was doing live engineering, that I want to say he got a gig with Michael McDonald. I think that's who it was, and wasn't available for a tour. And this guy called me up and he said, hey, I heard you're engineering now. And I said, yeah, I've been in the studio or whatever. And I was just getting tired of being in a closed-in room a lot, and I wasn't touring as much as I had been. And he said, do you want to go out and do sound for us for like a week? And I'd never done that before. He goes, have you ever done live sound? And of course I said, sure. Naturally. And so I went out, and it was kind of weird at first not playing, being on tour, but doing front of house sound, but I really liked it. And I thought, wow, I'm touring, and this is an opportunity to let my tendons heal or whatever.
Right.
It's a way to do, So I started doing. So once we did that week, I figured the guy was going to come back or whatever. Well, he didn't. He didn't come back, and they asked me to do it some more. And so I'm like, yeah, okay. So I'd be in the studio when I was home, and I would be doing, front of house sound. And I'm making the same money as the rest of the musicians were,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's what I make touring. Make the same thing, so why not? And then what happened was this guy that had hired me, that was the tour manager, had a big falling out, had a fight with the artist, and ended up leaving suddenly. And I thought, okay, well, now we're done with that. That was fun, whatever. And then Mark Hartley, who was David Benoit's manager at the time and now co-manager with me, called me up and said, hey, listen, if you can do tour management and front of house sound at the same time, we got a lot of work for you, starting with David. That's a guy like that is really in demand. And I thought about it. I said, well, let me get back to you. And I thought about it for a while, and I really felt like this is a turning point, and maybe it means I'm giving up being a musician. And I had mixed feelings about that. I mean, part of it was I really wanted to not be. That's all I'd ever done my whole life. And honestly, I was so tired of the music that I was doing programming, because what had happened in music is it had sort of gone from you're just doing a beat, just programming these drums, and then, and it was somewhat creative, and it was new technology, so you're kind of breaking ground, doing new things, and it's expanding. And then what started happening was guys would start coming to me, and they wanted to do what's called loops,
mm-hmm.
which, instead of sampling a snare drum or a kick drum or something like that and then pushing a button and sequencing it, which you've got a computer doing some of the work for you, but you have to actually create the part. So there is a creative level. Now what we're doing is we're taking 2 bars, 1 bar, or a certain snippet of music, and putting that in a loop. So you take 2 bars of a really great album, let's say a Miles Davis album, and we're going to take those 2 bars and play them over and over again and make a truly shitty album with people that don't even know what a chorus is. Like, I'm sitting down putting this record together with people that are, the way that they navigate around a song is by a lyric sheet. Like, they don't know that this is a verse and this is a chorus and this is the bridge, and it was just so unmusical, but they're paying my rent. They're, not perfectly nice people, nothing wrong with them, but I started thinking this was not what I had in mind when I was 7 and listening to the Beatles. This was not it at all. And I thought, well, there's an opportunity for me to do this stuff, and I really hate what I'm doing. I don't feel like it's musical at all. And I mean, sometimes it would be, but the other thing is that when you are starting at the very beginning of a song, putting it together, you don't spend 2 hours on a song. You spend 200 hours on a song. And I would do these loops. Then I would program the drum beats, and then I would be there programming the keyboards. Then I'd be in the studio, putting it all to tape, and then I'd be doing overdubs. Then I'd be so all of a sudden I'm hearing this song that I hated from the very beginning, and I'm hearing it 10,000 times, which every engineer in the studio has been through that, where you're like,
of course, yeah.
Trying to keep a positive attitude, but the whole time you're thinking, Is it time for a drink yet?
This really sucks.
This is awful.
Yeah.
You have technical expertise, so you can console yourself in the fact that you got a really nice kick drum sound, or this is you look at it as more of an electronic endeavor, and But the fact is that I was never really good enough of an engineer to really be able to do something where I could really truly be proud of the guitar sound I got. I'm more functional, I'm just getting it. My creative part was really I wasn't doing it anyway, and I thought I had met most of the managers, booking agents and stuff, meeting them from a musician's perspective. I had this idea of what a manager was that was kind of a Hollywood cigar chomping, guy, screw that guy, how can we mess these guys up? Basically that was my idea. And when I actually started working with Mark, he wasn't like that at all. He was, a regular guy and somebody that I would, talk to anyway. And he wasn't chomping a cigar. and it was, So I really became interested in that. And so I started doing tour management and along with the front of house engineer. And I enjoyed the engineering part, but I was always better at the tour management than I was at engineering. And I always knew what I was doing. I would learn whatever it was that I needed to learn, and from being a musician had a good enough ear to do it, but at the same time I knew I was never going to aspire to be the kind of level of audio engineer that I was aspiring to be as a musician. I put a lot more time and practice into being a musician than I ever did being an engineer. And I always knew a lot of really fantastic engineers that I always admired and stole whatever I could from, and paid attention to or whatever to do that. But it was always a lot more natural to me to be a manager. And it was a real natural thing to go from tour management to management. And I would end up doing that with several artists, where I was started as a tour manager and ended up managing them whenever they would have, because they're working with me all the time, and a lot of times I was doing a lot of the manager's job anyway. Whenever they'd have a problem with their manager, they would usually come to me and say, "Would you manage us?" And sometimes I said yes, sometimes I said no. There were times where I would just co-manage with with their existing management and say, "Look, these guys want to leave," and that happened to me a couple of times where I'd say, "These guys want to leave your management company, and they want me to take them somewhere else or just handle them. Let's work out a deal where I co-manage with you and you still keep the act, and I basically keep doing what I'm doing." And that worked out okay for a couple of things. With Robert Cray, I was doing tour management, and he had another manager here at Fitzgerald Hartley, and that manager decided to go out on his own. And so I had a loyalty to Fitzgerald Hartley because I'd worked with them off and on since like 92.
But you weren't a part of the company, though.
But I wasn't a part of the company.
Yeah.
And Mark and I had always talked about co-managing various artists, and there's other artists that I had gotten record deals for that I'd brought to Mark to co-manage, and it wasn't the right fit for him at the time or whatever, and I'd have to work with another manager or myself or whatever, and that was one of the reasons that I was working with Robert Cray, was because he was with Fitzgerald Hartley, and it was an opportunity to be working with Mark. So when this other manager went out on his own, we had the opportunity, Robert had the choice of either going with him with a new company or staying with Fitzgerald Hartley, and I gave him that choice. The other manager wasn't happy about it, but that's what happened, and that was maybe 5 years ago, something like that. And I've been managing Robert and continuing to do tour management for him ever since. A couple of weeks ago, got to do front of house again for a few days because we had our front of house guy have a heart attack. So I got pressed back into service, and it was fun. It was a real challenge because we have digital consoles. We have Midas Pro 2 consoles that I, walked past.
Right.
Never.
And those aren't actually very user friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
well,
tough.
Luckily, I mean, because it's the consoles that we bring around, his mix is set up. So
right.
I basically just had to make it go, and do whatever I needed to do on the fly. So I right away just figured out what I needed to do to tune the PA, to find. It took me a while just to find where the EQ for tuning the PA was.
Right.
But I found it and managed to get that working, and managed to find, basically get around or whatever. And it's complicated. The one thing that I had the biggest problem with was routing. That made no sense to me at all, and I had to get some help with that. But I did it,
Got through it.
I got through it.
So how many shows did you have to do? 3, okay.
And the first show was like seat of the pants because, he had a heart attack on Friday, and that was the show day. So, I had to, I had no idea how to even set the console up. And, so luckily we have 2 Pro 2s. Our production manager and monitor engineer also has a Pro 2. So he came out to help me, and I'm like, well, don't worry about it. Steve knows what he's doing. He's been doing this, from the beginning. And he looks at it and he goes, wow, Bob sure had this whole thing set up weird. I don't really understand it.
Yeah, that's the problem when you take over somebody else's file.
Yeah, and your whole approach to being a monitor engineer is way different than front of house. As anybody that's a front of house engineer has at some point has had to do monitors. Yeah. And pretty much anyone hates it. If you're a monitor engineer, you're a monitor engineer. It's just a different animal. And usually, monitor engineers don't do that well at front of house because it's just different. And front of house engineers don't usually do that well at monitors. I mean, you can do it. It's all audio. It's all signal path and how it sounds and all that. But it's a way different animal. And in this particular instance, because of the way this digital console is set up, you can do it a number of different ways. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and if one is set up one way, then it doesn't make any sense to you if you're doing. So anyway, it was tricky. The second show, there was somebody there that knew Pro 2s pretty well and helped me learn, and I could just sit there and just during the show. I mean, I've got the show up, everything's cool. We do and then I just spent. We did a sound check, and then I spent the next hour just grilling. Well, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you do this? And did my best to remember that. And so that show was I felt pretty confident. And then the third show, I was like, I have this down. And if something had gone wrong, I don't know that I would have been able to deal with it very well. I mean, I'm sure I would have managed to do something. And if I needed to set something up new or whatever, I probably would have had a hard time. But I felt relaxed and confident doing the show. And that third show, I actually had a lot of fun. And I was relieved when Bob was able to come back on. Our front of house engineer was able to come back on the show. But I was kind of disappointed too, But it was gratifying to know that, hey, especially since I'm, having to. Handle these guys all the time. It's nice to know that you can do their job, and I pretty much can do anyone's job. I can't do it as well as they do, but in a pinch,
you got through the show.
As long as it's not the artist, I can probably get by.
Do you ever still play drums?
People always ask me that. They always say, "Man, because there's drums there every day, at the show." And once in a while, I'll sit down and play a little bit. But the thing is that from being a musician, your ear and staying involved in music all the time, your ear continues to develop. Like I know that I hear things better and more than I did 10 years ago, even though 10 years ago I was playing not 10 years, 20 years ago I was playing every day.
Yeah.
But you continue, maybe not at the same level, but you continue to develop. But your hands stop doing what they're supposed to do right away. So my brain knows what it's supposed to sound like, and I'm very much aware that it's not that my hands aren't doing that.
And so feet.
And my feet. So I can feel the uncomfortability and the time kind of moving around. So I know what's wrong. When you're learning to play, you're protected by a certain amount of ignorance and naivete. So you think you always, you never realize how bad you are until you've gotten past that, and then you can look back and go, "Oh my God, I was terrible."
Mm-hmm.
How could I have gone out in public? But now I'm so much better. And then the next year you could do the same thing or whatever. But if you stop playing for a while, you're very much aware how much you slip. But at the same time, I've always felt like if I just took like a month and just didn't do anything else, maybe 2 months, and just shedded and practice, that I think I would be right back there and totally comfortable. But the truth is, it's sort of fun to play the drums, and it's sort of awful and painful and just like
it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
Physical work.
But I think if I had to, I think I could play our show. And, it wouldn't be the level. It wouldn't be as good a show as the night before. But I think I could get through the show.
That's good.
Yeah, and I hope to never find out.
Yeah, let's hope the drummer doesn't have a heart attack and you have to sit in for the drummer.
Well, what's funny is that there was one time we had a fine drummer named Tony Bronigal was playing with Robert Cray, and we were doing an outdoor show somewhere in Northern California. I remember Bonnie Raitt had come by and she was hanging out, and this drummer, Tony, used to play with Bonnie Raitt back in the day, and he's still friends with her or whatever, and he was hanging out with her, and we're doing the show that's an outdoor show and all this stuff, and towards the end of the show, last few tunes or whatever, he started feeling really bad. He'd been out riding his bike and stuff, and I think he was just dehydrated or something, but all of a sudden he was like, he calls me over, and I go over there, he's like, something isn't right, I don't. Anyway, he ends up coming off stage just before they do the encore, and I've got paramedics standing by, I've got all these guys standing by because I don't know if he's having a heart attack or what, and he says, I think I'm okay, and he's ready to go back up and do the encores. They do it like 2-song encore, and the paramedic goes, "You're not going anywhere," and he basically slapped him on a gurney and took him to the hospital, and I would have gone up and played the last 2 songs, the encores, except that he's yelling, "Tim," because they're taking him away to the hospital. He goes, "Get my wallet, get my phone," So I had to run to the tour bus and get his wallet and his phone, and so the bass player, Richard Cousins, hopped up and played the drums, and the keyboardist, Jim Pugh, just did left-hand bass, and it was fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if I hadn't been getting his wallet and his phone for him, which was a good thing that I did, but I would have played 2 songs with the Robert Cray Band.
So the Robert Cray Band is a dangerous place for people with a heart problem.
Apparently, suddenly it is.
So before we started this interview, you told me about the front of house engineer that you just talked about,
right.
And then there's another guy.
And then right after that, right after the tour that we had just finished doing, and getting through with the guy that had had a heart attack, our production manager had an even worse heart attack.
And he's also the monitor engineer.
And he's the monitor engineer. Well, luckily it didn't happen while we were on the road, or otherwise yours truly would have been doing monitor engineering too. But I mean, thank God it looks like he's going to be okay. But he was he was really, basically just fell to the ground like a sack of potatoes, and they had to start his heart and the whole.
So are you taking the rider and now eliminating all the bacon and red meat?
Well, here's the funny
off of
thing.
The rider.
I always joke. One thing that as a tour manager is that you get to answer a lot of questions. I do a daily sheet every day. where that I email out so people know what's going on and how it may differ from our tour book or whatever, what the next day is, what the schedule is. And then people still ask you, like what time are we leaving, whatever. And I don't want to tell them because I emailed them a daily sheet. So, instead of saying read your daily sheet, I always tell them, we'll see you at 6 a.m. for calisthenics. Every day I tell them that. And then I also add, I don't know where everybody was there today, where were you? And of course we've never done that. It's just a joke. It's a joke, but now I'm thinking, well, maybe we need to start, And I, a couple of years ago, started, I had a little bit of a health scare myself, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I started taking my diet and exercise seriously, and now I really do that, and I'm way into it, and I want to be around for a while. And my doctor had said, well, you're right at that age where you kind of go one way or the other. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to go one way, not the other.
Right.
But not everybody. Touring can be a very unhealthy thing. I mean, the food choices that are out there, but you can do it if you really make an effort, and some people do. Some people manage to, exercise every day and eat really healthy. And usually, that's not the tour manager. The tour
tour manager and the rest of the crew. Your schedule is so grueling.
You start early and you end late, and there's the times in between. You're just trying to. You still have to deal with the same things that people have to deal with at home. So you're online paying bills, or you're, talking to your family or friends or whatever. They are long days, and so it's not conducive to a healthy lifestyle. But you can do it if you really make an effort. But you have to really make an effort. So, now I think we're going to be, I don't know about 6 a.m., but there could be calisthenics involved. We'll see. And I had our front of house guy that said, I said, well, you're going to meet with doctors now. I'm sure they're going to tell you they're going to want to put you on an exercise program and diet and stuff like that. And I said, watch, 6 months from now, you'll be like this super healthy guy, and you'll be going, come on, let's jog. And he just looked at me and said, fat chance. But you never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Sometimes when somebody tells you that you died or almost died, it kind of means something to people. It wakes them up.
Well, yeah, and and it's funny. Some people, have a really positive reaction to that, and some people don't. And we're going to find out now. But I had I've had all kinds of crazy things and situations happen to me. I mean, as a tour manager, one of the things that you're always doing in any instance, if you're good, is you're thinking, what could possibly go wrong now? And the best accidents are the ones that don't happen. I mean, and if you have to have the ability to do a couple of things. You have to be able to deal with whatever the situation is and keep a cool head. And you have to think of what might go wrong and try and prevent it. An ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. That's certainly really true in the entertainment business and travel.
And you're always thinking a day ahead and 3 days ahead
right,
and a week ahead. You're always
right. Like I never know what's going on now unless there's an emergency.
You already did that.
I'm working on the next thing.
Yeah. And
if I were doing a great job with now, all of our nows would be terrible because I didn't think about it, early enough. So, but especially like when you're talking about a moving, thing like a tour. I mean, that's the whole nature is travel, and there's just no end to the things that can go wrong, especially these days with, the way airlines are and I mean, I've got we don't have a big operation. I really like the size of our operation. We have one bus, we have one truck, and it's 10 people, and that's great. If you do bigger tours, and I've been involved in bigger tours, mostly as managing the opening act, but we did when I first started with Robert, we were opening for Eric Clapton. And that's a pretty big tour. And the tour manager is kind of handling departments rather than everything. So you're sort of, a lot of delegation and that kind of thing. And when you do a smaller tour, you're involved in every single aspect and every personality, and it's a totally different animal, and I like it, and I like having that kind of smaller thing like that. But it means you feel every bump, and literally every bump. And now the roads of America are rapidly disintegrating, and there's no new technology for buses that makes that better, and people have to sleep, and so I mean you're dealing with which road to take based on not so much mileage as can we survive this?
Right, yeah. Bumpy roads.
Yeah.
No, they're like that all over the place. I've been to Germany a lot, and it's like that in Germany too in certain places.
Yeah,
It's
I remember
bad.
it used to be in America, it used to be that there were certain states that had, I remember always going, oh God, we've got to drive through Pennsylvania. And if you were going like the long way through Pennsylvania, it was going to be rough. Now there's no difference between Pennsylvania and anywhere else. There's a few places that have there's some smooth roads here and there, but
You said there's 10 people on this tour. How many crew? And
there are 4 crew, including myself, 4 band members, and 2 drivers, a bus driver and a truck driver. We have different bus drivers often, but we have the same truck driver pretty much all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we have a couple sets of gear. We have what we call our A gear, which is, monitors, front of house console, monitor console, all our mics, all of our backline, and just kind of everything. And that goes on the truck, and that stays in the U.S. And then we have our B gear, which is just musical gear, and a few odds and ends, audio things, a few mics, and just kind of the bare minimum with that. And that lives in Europe. We were traveling. The Robert Cray band is the kind of a thing where the equipment is, a lot of tube stuff, a lot of kind of vintage things, and it's important to him that we have. It's an authentic outfit, and they have authentic gear, and that's a big deal to him. He's not okay with playing any kind of new anything really. I mean, so you have to really take care of that equipment, and you can't. It's difficult equipment to get
parts,
backline and parts for, and all that. So,
right.
So consequently, we have 3 sets of his gear. The third set of gear that we call the C gear is essentially just all of Robert's gear, a third set of Robert's gear, and we use that when we have to do a show where we're going to use backline. We'll bring in his equipment, and the rest of the band's equipment will be rented, backline, what we call backline, and so the logistics of that are always, difficult and expensive. And
when you need to ship that somewhere, it's expensive.
We did have a second set of gear that we would ship around, and it was so expensive going to Europe. And we go to Europe a couple times a year. And it just made more sense to just import it into Europe and leave it there. And it's ended up saving, over years, saves a lot of money. But it's expensive to tour the way that we tour, especially for the level of income that this tour has. So every little thing makes a big difference, which I kind of like. I like the challenge of making a tour profitable, and it's hard to do. The costs keep going up, but the guarantees don't go up like the amount of money that the artist makes doesn't keep going up unless they sell more tickets. Mm-hmm. And an artist that's been around a long time usually has a very even amount of tickets that they sell. It goes up a little, it goes down a little, but it's not volatile that way. But you have no control over airline prices and gas prices, and,
right?
All those kinds of things. So you really have to be efficient.
But the Robert Cray band, you guys don't do hardly any one-offs. You're always on a rail tour where you have your truck and you have your bus and you have all your equipment.
And the nature of the way we tour sort of dictates that. So I've had lots of other artists that we do, what we call fly dates, and they're more lucrative because you just get in here and get out there or whatever. But for Robert, we have to do longer tours, and it's almost entirely bus tours. We have one show coming up this year that I talked Robert into doing, using backline equipment and not flying his stuff in. We're going to do a show in Mexico, and it's with George Thorogood, and we're only doing 60 minutes, so we're not even headlining the show. We're opening for George, and I'm like, why don't we save the money and not send the equipment out there? And I honestly was surprised when he said okay, because and to his credit, he cares about his sound, and it's not like, to me, most of his sound is the way that he plays and the way that he sings. It's not so much about what amp he's playing through, and it'll be fine, it'll be good, and he'll probably be bitterly disappointed with it. Because he won't like sound the way that he wants it to, and he'll be the only one that really knows.
Right.
But so whether I'm able to talk him into doing that again, we'll see.
Right. Well, I as you know, I work with Christopher Cross, and he is exactly the same way. No matter what, he wants his amps,
right?
Because they're all tweaked and modified, and he wants them the same thing every day. Doesn't want to have something weird.
There's no such thing as a good change or a good surprise. Any surprise is bad. And I pretty much agree with that as a tour manager and as a manager. It's like people come up to you and they go, "Hey, we have a surprise." That's not something you want to hear. It's always, "Oh, no surprises. Let's just do exactly what we agreed to and exactly what we want, and just have it, even on the chance that it might be something better, that there's a much greater chance that's going to be, something that nobody wants to do, and, whatever." So,
right.
But that's just the nature of the beast. And there's something that somebody told me when I was first getting into tour management, and that was that, in fact, it was a tour manager that Mark Hartley had set me up with, who did all these big tours. And he said, "I want you to go and meet with this guy, and he'll tell you how to be a tour manager," basically. And this guy printed up a sheet that had some basic stuff on it. But for me, it was like that's all I had to go on. So, I really paid attention. But one of the things that he said that I never forgot was he said, when you're on tour, all anybody cares about is luxury. That's all that any artist cares about. They just want it to be nice. And when the tour is over, all anybody cares about is how much money they made. And he goes, the tour is a lot shorter than the time after the tour. He goes, during the tour is going to be however long that tour is. After the tour lasts forever. So they'll always remember that they didn't make money. So you always have to find ways to make things as nice as you can within the budget that makes sense. And you'll spend a lot of time trying to talk the artist or the band or whoever into doing things that's not what they want to do at that moment, but that's the right thing to do. You always have to be that voice of reason. And sometimes you just can't do it. Sometimes I have one artist that I worked with who really liked taking private jets, and he could kind of afford it a little bit, but not as much as he wanted to. And he actually told me when he hired me, he said, try to keep me off the jets. And I said, well, should I just say no? And he said, well, no, if I really want to go, then, I was like, okay, so thank you for the vague answer there. So that's what I would do. I would try to talk him out of taking a private jet. And his business manager would always be telling me, don't let him take the jet. And I'm like, well, I can't stop him from taking the jet. I mean, I work for him, So I would do my best
talk him out of it.
Uh-huh. And more often than not, I would be able to talk him out of it. And I was always tempted to lie, and I was tempted to say, well, I made some calls, and because I would always have to check into it. I would have to find out a whole lot of information about the jets. I would have to, and of course, how much it was going to cost and everything. And I would I would do these spreadsheets that shows here's how much you make if you don't take the jet, here's how if you do. And, I knew that I was going through this exercise, but I knew there was a chance that regardless of how much it cost, he was still going to do it. But there was a temptation to say, why don't we just not do any research at all and just put down a really high number that he for sure can't afford and will say no to, and then we're done. There's always a temptation to do that because that's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. But lying is generally a bad idea, and I find that whenever I didn't resist that temptation and stretch the truth a little bit, that it always came back to bite me in the butt. So I just gave up on that. I would just resign myself to, okay, I'm going to have to find out exactly what this is going to be and give an honest answer. And I think that over the years, though, people tend to need to rely on that. They need to count on you. They need to know that you're giving them the straight truth. And even though that they should just say no or they should just say yes to this or no to that, you still have to let them make the decision, even though some of them clearly aren't capable of it. But they do it anyway. It's their, you have to remind yourself, it's their career. I'm getting paid either way, And but it's it can be really frustrating, and there was a couple of particular instances with this artist where it was just ridiculous, It just didn't, But whatever, that's what you do. They all have their quirks.
Yes, they do.
Some of them have, I'm not going to say who it was, but I had a friend who said there are two kinds of artists, with the ones that can pull it together and seem normal when they need to, like for an interview or something, and the ones that are so screwed up they can't even do that. I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but sometimes that's not too far from the truth,
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, it's kind of a weird business, and the people that manage to get into a position where people want to pay to see them have always had an interesting and twisted road, and have been, sometimes, really tortured, and I think that everyone in the crew, and sometimes a tour manager and manager sees it more because they tend to see more of the artist's personality a lot of times than crew members do, Not always. I mean, some artists are like, this is who they are around anybody that they're around. But a lot of them will, like, say something nice to somebody, and then they'll go to the tour manager and go, fire that guy. I've had those. They're like, yeah, that's great. Oh, you're doing a great job. Hey, and 5 minutes later, they're like, get rid of that guy. I've had a couple of times where that's happened, where it wasn't good, but it was just so out of the blue that you just couldn't help but laugh. The point is that you are exposed to the artist more than you might be with the crew, but everybody has to remember, and a lot of times be reminded of that's why you're there. You're there for whatever, for good or bad, difficult or easy. You're there to realize the vision of that artist, no matter how wrong you think it might be for that day.
They are the boss. They are paying.
And it's not just that they're the boss. It's that they end up holding the bag. Everybody in the crew, and I've said this to guys before. Everybody in the crew, it's like when this artist, career takes a huge nosedive, you're just going to get another gig. They can't do that. They're still them. So they have a responsibility that they're usually pretty aware of, that and it gets expressed in a lot of different ways, but the truth is, it's their name on that marquee. I think in some ways it's good to give them credit for taking a risk to do something truly stupid, and it's easy for everyone to, and it's like, I think it was President Kennedy that said, success has a lot of parents, failure is an orphan. And that's really true. They're going to, when you think something is a really stupid idea that the artist does and it becomes successful, you forget right away that you thought it was a stupid idea. You'll remember when it's not successful. You go, I told them that was a dumb idea. And, And I remember one time seeing Annie Lennox on television. I don't know, whatever show it was. And she had her band dressed up in these ridiculous, embarrassing outfits. And it was her, you could see, this is her or somebody's artistic vision. And one guy was standing on a chair for no particular reason. It's just a chair there. And I'm sure she or somebody said, probably her, she said, Jimmy, I want you to stand on this chair. And I could just picture the band musicians being what they are going, oh my God, I can't believe
Yeah, you're dressing me up in a stupid outfit, and now I got to stand on a chair.
I mean, look, I don't know. I didn't know her. I don't know the situation at all. Maybe everyone thought it was great and they were all into it. But in my mind, I was thinking of them, and I was thinking they're all going, oh, I can't believe that, And for her, it was just an artistic vision, And of course, the in that particular instance, the thing is that her band all looked goofy, but she looked normal. So it's like I'm like, what did they do to you? You punish? Are you about to fire these guys? And you just thought you'd humiliate them first? I mean, who knows? Those are the kinds of things that are going through, through my mind. But still, that whatever that artistic vision is, she ended up having to, own it, and evidently she managed to get past it. Right. But I mean, those things happen all the time where somebody's got or more often the artists, there's stuff that they really should do that they say no to. That's the way Robert is. He honestly, if he could do, he really is about the art of it. He would do the show with no audience there at all. It's more just if the band plays good and he sings good and he just said they really do good. That really is all that he cares about. And I mean, I'm sure if people were throwing tomatoes at him, he would notice and whatever. But that's really his thing, and he would rather not be involved. I can't even get him to make an announcement from the stage that there's merchandise for sale in the lobby. He won't do it.
Right. Will he go out and sign?
He will not. When I first started working with him, I said, Robert, if I could get you to come out and sign for these people, we'd sell a whole lot more CDs. And he looked at me and he said, I bet we would. And that was the end of it. And I went, okay. So what I finally did was I'd say, well, how about if I bring you these CDs, backstage and get you to sign them? They'll already be signed. And he agreed to do whatever the newest record was. So when we're touring, the new record is autographed. Mm-hmm. And, we obviously sell a lot more of them. And what's really funny is when people hang around backstage and manage to get a chance to get an autograph from him, and they hand him a record that he'd signed a couple hours before and say, could you sign this? He goes, I already did. Well, could you sign it again? It's going to look exactly the same, and I think a lot of people probably figure that I'm back there signing them.
Right.
And I probably would do that if I was capable of doing his signature.
Years ago, I won't mention the name of the artist, but I used to work with an artist that had to, sign a lot of merchandise, CDs and stuff. And he bought a machine that actually, it's a robot.
Robo-signer.
And it actually signed his signature.
Right.
It was exact.
You cannot tell the difference between the robo-signature and
it's a pen, the pen in there, it signs it. Exactly, because he would have gotten carpal tunnel syndrome signing all the stuff that he had to sign.
Yeah.
So
well, Robert's signature has evolved over the years, so it's like it takes a tenth of a second to do his signature. And I've had artists before that had elaborate signatures that they would stick with. I had one, I won't mention his name, but he would do these signatures. He would only use a certain kind of art pen, a kind that was great at smearing and not taking a while to dry, and and everything. And he had this elaborate signature, and if it wasn't right, if anything happened, he would just take that album or whatever and throw it away. He didn't want it to exist. He didn't want that poster to be out there. We'd have to throw away like a lot of stuff because he didn't want an incorrect signature to be out there. But it took forever. But he did it, to his credit. He would sit there and do it. We'd spend hours.
That's the artist in them, right?
Yeah, it was a beautiful signature, So anyway, well, Robert would rather not do any of that. He doesn't like promoting himself. He doesn't like talking about himself. He doesn't like, doing any of the social media that artists have to do. And we drag him to those things, and and I cajole him into doing it, and I talk him into it, and I am always trying to talk Robert into doing things that are more publicity oriented. And but you respect the fact that it's really about the art. It's great, but we have to sell tickets, and we have to sell records and all those things. And
otherwise there is no touring, right?
Right. I mean, I have to think about
make money
stuff, but I like the idea of an artist that doesn't promote themselves. It just doesn't really work these days, which is a shame.
Yeah, right.
I'd be happy to have to manage artists that never did that didn't have to do that.
So you have Robert Cray as your client, as a manager, and do you have any other artists that you're managing at this time?
The management company here has lots of artists. There's 2 offices. There's here in Ventura, and then the larger one, which is in Nashville, and they have a lot of country artists. And right now, I'm looking at I'm meeting with a few different artists that I'm considering managing, but I'm just doing Robert Cray right now because we're really busy. We've got a new record, and we're doing, the fact that I'm doing tour management and management makes it difficult to do much more. And so when I take on a client that's the size of Robert Cray or larger, I'm going to have to stop touring, or at least not as much. So I'll have to kind of give up tour management to do straight management, which I'm looking forward to doing. I'm looking forward to making that change. But it'll be nice to be around more. Just my life right now would be great to be home. And there's been times where I couldn't wait to get out on the road. I got, my last marriage when I was making a big effort to be home more, and I was doing a lot more management and a lot less tour management. And I would just do, weekends tour management with classic artists and stuff like that. And that was cool. But when I got divorced, I had no excuse to stay home, and I hit the road, and I basically have done that ever since. And it's been about 15 years of touring, 15 years of solid touring since then. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to not being on the road as much, but I'll miss it too.
Mm-hmm. Sure. When I'm home for more than 2 weeks at a time, I start to think, when am I going to get out of here? When am I going to get back out on the road again? I like being on the road.
I
actually enjoy it.
I wish there was some way that I could simultaneously be on the road and not be on the road, because I miss being home when I'm on the road.
Yeah, of course.
But I like the constant movement. I like the intensity of it.
Mm-hmm.
At any given moment, I might be whatever I'm doing. I'm probably dealing with something that I'd rather not be dealing with, and kind of miserable. And one of the things that you have to do as a tour manager is you have to do a lot of negotiating. You have to be the heavy, And I really make an effort these days. There's been times where I've gravitated towards being the heavy too easily, and I've really learned over the last several years to not do that. And I really make it a huge effort to start off nice in every situation, and only get tough when I need to, when I've actually made the decision that that's the way to handle this. Okay, this is what this situation dictates, rather than I'm just losing my temper,
Right.
And I find that makes it really a lot easier to get over whatever it is too. I know when I'm being rough on somebody, that I'm doing that as a tactic, and that I'm not emotionally involved in it, because it's the kind of job that can really tear you up, because it's hard and it's relentless, and as soon as you're done with whatever, you've got some other problem, and sometimes, and everybody's constantly coming to you, they're like, Tim.
That's whenever I come home from a tour, if I'm tour managing and mixing front of house, then I come home and I tell my wife, I'm so sick of hearing my name.
Right.
I hear it 1,000 times a day.
Yeah.
Everybody's, Ross, what time is the lunch? Ross, why is the...
You know,
it's over and over.
And you wonder, how do these guys, when they're home, how do they manage to survive it all?
Yeah. How do they do anything on their own?
How can they? And the truth is, they're probably fine. They just, if they had you at home, they'd be doing the same thing, but they don't, so they manage.
Yeah. But you said before, the most frustrating thing is you do all this work, you put together a tour book that has, you've got the itinerary for every day, and then if there are any little changes, you're going to let them know about these little changes, but still, they're going to still come up to you and say, what time's dinner?
Yeah. And what I do now, I have a whole thing that I do when they ask a question. I always go, I have no idea. I'm going to have to look it up on the daily sheet.
Right.
Have you seen the daily sheet? Do you have it? You know what? I don't have. I forgot to email it to myself. I'm pretty sure I emailed it to you. And then what I'll do sometimes is I'll start peppering them with other questions. Oh, and so what time are we leaving? When you look up that daily sheet,
yeah, can you let me know?
Can you let me know how far is the drive tonight? I have no idea. Well, and they're like, yeah. I mean, they know I know.
Doesn't everybody expect you to know it right off the top of your head too?
I mean, what I'll do, I'll know what it is. If I want to really make them feel bad, I'll start looking it up. I'll go, well, let me look that up for you. And I'll get out my computer, or I'll do whatever, pull out the tour book or whatever. And as soon as you start to do that, they go, oh, I can look it up. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Why don't you do that in the first place?
But I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to say at 4 o'clock. I don't know. Beats me. Who knows? I don't know how these things even happen. It's a mystery.
That's good. Yeah, well, you do learn all the tricks.
Yeah, well, I've been doing it for a long time. I mean, I first started doing tour management in 92. It was 1992 when I first did tour management, so that's been a while. You always think like you've seen everything. And then something comes up and you go, well, what do you know? I have not seen that.
Yeah.
That is a first.
Yeah.
Never anything good, but it's nice to know. It is, for me, it's a satisfying feeling that I feel like whatever happens, I can deal with it. I used to worry, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And now I'm like, I'll know what to do. And I do that just in life now, too. I mean, if you say anything to me, I'm immediately thinking of what could possibly go wrong. And I've had people say to me before that's pessimistic. And for me, it's not. It's
reality, isn't it?
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that I think that something's going to go wrong. I can still be totally optimistic. I can still hope that nothing goes wrong. It's just that when something does, I'm ready for it because I already thought about it. Mm-hmm. And you develop the ability to do that as a tour manager and as a manager. What's going to go wrong here? And I'm not sure that it's going to go wrong, but I'm sure that and when something happens that I hadn't thought of, I thought, okay, you make a little note, that, and sometimes it's just stuff that's just so left field that there's no way you could possibly have known that was going to happen. But you have to have that confidence. People need to feel like whatever happens, we've got this guy to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that's important. People need to be led. They want that reassurance. They want to know that. I mean, I think that's what an artist wants in their manager, maybe more than anything else. A guy that they know is on their side. They know has their back. They know cares about whatever it is they care about, even when they disagree with them. I mean, I'm always careful to do that. I'll say, I don't think that's the right thing to do, but that's what you want. I'm going to do my best to get that for you. And they know that you're sincere about that, and they know that they've got that kind of safety net. That you're going to be honest with them. But more than anything else, when something goes wrong, you're going to deal with it.
Right.
You're either going to know, and I find you've got to be honest about it. Sometimes when you don't know what to do, You don't want to pretend that you do know what to do when you don't know what to do. People feel that. People can sense that. They know that they're just being BS'd. But what you do is you say, what I learned to do is, I don't know, but I'll find out. I'll deal with it. Don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that that's what's going to happen. They know you're going
Right.
to find some way to deal with it, whatever it is, And then you do, like anybody does in any situation, And I always think that no matter how bad it happens to be at that moment, people have dealt with a lot worse, and those things have just been thrust on them, Somebody managed to survive damn near anything you could ever come up with. We're going to get through this flight being canceled, and also you get really good at those kinds of logistics. Like if somebody tells me where they're going, and if they tell me where they changed planes, I immediately know what airline they were on, stuff like that. I'm like, oh, so you're on Delta, and they go, yeah.
Because you know what city is the hubs. And
You
all
changed
that
in
stuff.
Atlanta from here to there. You must have been on Delta,
Right.
You learn that system. And unfortunately, it's getting harder and easier at the same time. Easier in the sense that there are less airlines that you can get anywhere on, and harder in that they're all, awful and getting worse every minute, and finding new ways to charge fees for,
And to make your life just miserable.
I had a conversation with a pilot not too long ago where this flight attendant was just being over the top with one of the guys. It was just stupid. And there was no reason for it, and she was just being petty and, whatever. And it was a problem. It was becoming all of a sudden it was a problem. And I ended up talking to the pilot about it. He said, I'm so disgusted with this airline. He goes, this was a United pilot. He goes, I'm flying my family to Europe. We're not even taking United. And I get free tickets on United,
Wow.
We're taking a different airline or whatever. And
Yeah.
he, it was, a weird situation or whatever. I was flying back from England maybe a year or two ago, and I was supposed to get, it was one of those deals where I was supposed to get upgraded, and I didn't get upgraded. So I was expecting to be flying in business class, which when you're flying a lot and when you're doing a long trip like that, that really...
It means something.
It means a whole lot.
Yeah, it means a lot.
There's nothing in the world more important to you than that business class seat. And I could spend the money and just do it, but it's a lot,
Oh, yeah, it's very expensive.
So you do strategies to upgrade or whatever. Anyway, I was going to be upgraded. It was already done, and then it ended up one of those deals. No, just kidding. You got this crappy seat, and I had this seat where that has the entertainment, little TV or whatever that folds up.
Oh,
but it's
in
broken.
the armrest?
Right, but it's broken, so there's no way for it to hold up. And I have pictures of it where we taped it. I mean, we managed to get some tape, or whatever. But right away, the flight attendant was this guy, and he was just a jerk, like they are sometimes, And there was a couple other things that were wrong too, and it was just like there was no reason for it. And he goes, "Well, we'll report that and we'll have it fixed." And I go, "No, you won't. This plane has been flying, like you can see, this has been broken for a long time. Whatever it is you say you're going to do, the next guy is going to have to sit in this seat too." And there's literally not a single open seat in the plane, so there's nowhere to go. And I was shorter with the guy than I had to be, but whatever. And he immediately reacted to it and was like, "Sir," and was upset about the way that I was talking to him. And I stopped and I said, everybody sitting around me, and I said it really loud. He goes, "Understands that if I'm mean to the person at the gate, I'm not going to get on the plane. If I'm mean to the person at the ticket counter, I'm not going to get on the plane. I can't communicate with anybody at United that's wearing a suit. They're not here. They're not, you can fill out a thing on the web. You're it. The only person that I can complain to and that I, can lose my temper with at all is you. And so that's what you get all the time. And I said, and everybody sitting around me agrees with that, and they did. They're all like, yeah, we know, these are all people that are, and the guy just said, well, he couldn't argue with me. He goes, well, you're right. I go, well, that's why you end up with irate passengers. You're at the end of the chain, and yeah, you don't know what that person's been through before they sat down in this seat.
Right, it could be
and
their fourth flight of the day or something.
Yeah, and chances are it's all kinds of, they've been, been treated like they weren't even human, for the last 20 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
So be nice to them.
Yeah. Well, they have a tough job too, because mostly what they hear is complaints.
Job. Yeah.
So they, everybody's got these
and
bad
some
things
of
about
them,
the job.
And some of them like anything, and that's the way that brings me back around to how you handle tour management. Some people handle it better than others, and I have learned over the years, hopefully, to be able to compartmentalize and be nice most of the time, and not feel bad about being a dick when you have to be, and not being afraid of being confrontational when you need to be or whatever. But don't take it home, and don't take it personally, and just, it's a tactic.
Yeah.
You have to somehow manage to make things work. You somehow manage to get things done, and you do it whatever way you can. But I really appreciate having a nice, easy day and having everybody be friends and smiles and all that. In fact, I've had situations, I haven't done this in a long time, but there's been times where everything was great and the local crew was just not getting stuff done. They're just being, incompetent or lazy or whatever. And I'll stop the whole crew and say, okay, you remember me, you liked me, but you guys are not getting shit done. That's over. Now I'm going to be a total asshole to you because and I resent the fact that you've made me do that. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bark out orders. You're going to do exactly what I say, and that's it. And then maybe afterwards we can be friends again. But if not, oh well. And that's the speed. I've literally stopped the whole stage and made them do it, and then do it. I'll just, you do this, you do that, and as soon as they, if they deviate at all, what did I tell you to do? And you just be just a jerk. But I started off nice. I pointed out to them that this is all their fault. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be nice again later once they just do whatever. And then afterwards apologize to everyone. Sorry about being such an asshole. Still, your fault.
You have to get the show.
But yeah, we got to get stuff done.
The show must go on.
You guys just weren't getting together. And I hope you learned something from this. And I'm sure there are people that through the course of stuff, they say, oh, did you work with that, tour manager for whatever act it was? And they go, oh, yeah, what a jerk. God, he was a jerk. And then somebody from the next day go, what a nice guy. God, he was fantastic. And the day was really it. And when other people, when you're out on the road, you hear about everybody, Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, we had so-and-so through here last night. Well, what'd you think? And they go, man, that tour manager was a jerk. And right away, I know there's a pretty good chance that this guy's going to bring out, the jerk in me. So I'm forewarned.
Right.
I don't tell him that, but I'm like, hey, okay, so now I know what to look out for. And when they think I'm a nice guy at the end of the day, it's because I managed to get around whatever it was but I know that chances are that tour manager, maybe they're right. He could have just been a jerk. And if you hear about the same guy over and over again being a jerk, well, you know that's just who he is.
Right.
And I don't know. People do their jobs differently. There's a lot of tour managers that can really be, they're just trying to get their job done. But
everybody has their own way of doing it. Yeah.
I'd rather it be nice.
Yeah, of course. I think you take the right approach.
At the end of the day, it's got to get done, right? So that's what management is about, getting it done, and especially tour management, get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, like I've been, fairly successful at making the transition from tour management to management, but a lot of times the managers are better at finessing things, and tour managers are better at just getting it done right now. And sometimes that getting it done right now attitude isn't the best thing for moving up into management, because some of those things really need to be finessed. And it's funny wearing both hats. Sometimes I'll be talking to a promoter as a tour manager, and sometimes I'll be talking to him as a manager, and sometimes they don't know that it's the same guy. I've gotten complaints about me before. And I've also gotten praise. Hey, listen, by the way, that tour manager was fantastic. And I'm like, well, thank you. He's a pretty nice guy. Blah blah blah.
I know him
they
personally.
have no idea that it's the same guy.
Oh, that's funny. Well, anything new and exciting coming up in the near future for you, Tim?
Looking forward to whatever the next acts that I'm going to be doing are, and looking for having meetings and looking for the right fit for the next thing. So. And then we'll see how well I adjust to not traveling. It's always there. I can always get
you can always go back, right?
Right.
Is there a website that you'd like to tell people about, either your personal
for Robert Cray,
or for
it's just robertcray.com.
Okay.
Real easy. And I'm on there too. If you look under contact or whatever, there's me, and I have an assistant, Kim, and we're always reachable for all you big stars out there that are looking.
Yeah, somebody's looking for a new manager. Yeah. Well, that's great. Oh, one last little thing that this is a thank you, because when about 7-8 years ago or something, when I was working for Christopher Cross, and I was just the front of house man, but then the tour manager that we had left, and all of a sudden I was the tour manager, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I came to you, and you taught me how to be a tour manager.
Wise choice.
I came over to your apartment, and we sat there for the evening, and you gave me templates, to use.
I bet you
which I
still
use them. and just took me through the thing, and I was able to pull it off. I fooled everybody.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I told them I was a tour manager.
There's no school of tour management.
No.
I mean, there's no reason why there couldn't be, but the truth is that, people come to that job a lot of different ways. I mean, and a lot of times from being an audio engineer, sometimes being a musician.
Well, as you know, nowadays, in this level of the artists like Robert Cray or Christopher Cross, everybody has multiple jobs. Right. Nobody's just doing one thing.
Yeah, it's too expensive to not just... when you think about when you have a guy on a crew, you've got to think about you've got that person's hotel, you've got that person's flight, you've got that person's salary, you've got that person's per diem, you have insurance, you have all these things that it costs well beyond whatever you're paying the guy. So doing multiple jobs in that level of touring has always been the name of the game, and will never. I don't think that's ever going to.
Well,
change.
unless you get up to the next level above that, where you're touring with Madonna or
when you're doing stadium
like
tours, when you're doing that sort of thing, then everybody has their one job.
Yeah.
But as soon as you get down into the not just emerging acts, but acts that are viable, sell 1,000 tickets or whatever acts, that is really the meat and potatoes of when you look around town, you look at all the shows that are going on. There's that arena thing, that's not every
that's
day.
one show, but then there's hundreds of shows.
And then
within,
there's all these other shows in any kind of sizable city that are going on, and that is filled with people that are all doing multiple jobs. So, and the other thing is that even if you are doing arena tours like that, the problem with that kind of tour is you go out and do that tour for whatever it is, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and then it's done. Mm-hmm. A lot of these other acts kind of work all year long, or they'll do sporadic, and maybe you'll have 2 or 3 different acts that you're working with, like you do a lot,
like I
right?
do, yeah.
And I've done that a lot in the past as well. And if you're doing multiple jobs, like you might just do one job with one artist and a different job with another artist, and both of those jobs with the third artist.
That's true.
Having that ability to do several different things is really a valuable skill in the music business. I've found that people that are doing multiple jobs are as good at that any one of those jobs as the people that just do one job often.
It's just very hard.
So those people don't agree. But
as you know, it's just very hard to, when I'm mixing front of house and doing tour management, and I'm trying to set up my console, or I'm trying to, do technical stuff, and my phone is beeping, running,
right.
messages constantly coming in from the artist about, hey, what's for dinner tonight? Or how's it going over there? Or anything. It's just every little thing just distracts you from whatever job you have at the time, and that's the hard part.
Is the
is being able to go from looking at your phone to answering that question, and then going right back to whatever it was that you were doing.
It's really hard. I always found that was the most difficult thing, and I remember when I was early on, when I was doing tour management in front of house, there would be some other acts that had a guy that was just doing tour management, and they would always say to me, "Why are you doing that? Why are you doing both?" And I always liked doing it, but I have to say that, in fact, when I first was hired for Robert Cray, that was the manager's idea. Was he wanted to work me in as doing front of house and tour management because they were trying to save money. But the truth was Robert was happy with his front of house engineer, and I actually went in and started doing some of the shows, and he was like, I'd rather have the other guy do it. And I'm like, I'm fine with that as long as you're happy with tour management, with just doing tour management. He goes, yeah, I am. And I'd done both. I'd done some stuff where I was just doing tour management, and some stuff where it enabled me to do much more. I don't want to say it's a better job or a more thorough job of tour management, but more details that you're able to handle.
I believe that you can do a better job when you only have...
It's just if you have less that you have to do, you can focus more on it.
Yeah.
And I don't really think that it wasn't that I was doing not as good of a job as a tour manager when I was doing front of house, but you have to cut. There's only so much time, and you have to manage to do both, and you just can't be in two places at once. A lot of times, just during the show, you're stuck out there in front of house. I get a lot done when the band is on stage and they can't be pestering me with questions or anything. I mean, that's the one time where I know, I can actually get...
And if somebody does come to you at that time, there's something bad happening.
Yeah, something really bad has happened, and let's face it, that's happened. But, you're able to... But it's just the reality of stuff. I mean, you never know what's going to happen in the entertainment business. I might be, a year from now, I might be wildly successful manager, not looking back. I might be doing tour management in front of house somewhere. You just don't know. And I'm really grateful that I've got those skills that I can continue to do that. But I don't think anyone's going to call me and hire me just as an engineer. Like, they'll call you and hire you as an engineer because you've always been an engineer, a great engineer. So that's what they're going to do. But I would get hired at being able to do both.
Sure. Yeah.
Or probably they'd hire me as a lighting guy, and I'd have no idea what I was doing.
That'd be trouble for me too.
I've known tour managers that were lighting guys.
Yeah. That's tough though, because the lighting guys they spend a lot more time programming than audio engineers do. It's a very intense day of work every day. Yeah. Even if they're carrying lights, it's still
and they
you still have to come in and you have to adjust everything
situations
for that venue. It's very big.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
All right. Well, unless you have another worldly tidbit of information, all right. Well,
Eat a hot lunch.
Tim Aller of Fitzgerald Hartley and the Robert Cray Band. I'm going to sign off and thank you very much, Tim, for agreeing to do this interview. I think it was very interesting. I think people are going to love it, and they're going to love you.
Thanks for letting me babble and talk about myself.
All right, Tim. Well, goodbye.
Bye.
The Rossaround Backstage podcast wants to thank my good friend, Tim Hines, for the original music that you are listening to now. We are currently looking for sponsors for the Rossaround Backstage podcast so that we can continue to bring you interesting stories like the one you just heard. I can be reached through Facebook or email me rossapallone.com. Thank you for listening.